Hello guys, you're welcome to this lesson. In this lesson, we'll be looking at electron configuration. In this lesson, we are going to talk about electron configuration. When you talk about electron configuration, it's simply how electrons are arranged in orbitals around the nucleus of an atom. Or we are just going to describe how electrons are arranged in the orbitals of an atom. So when you talk about electron configuration, it simply means arrangement of electrons in orbitals around the nucleus. Arrangement of electrons in orbitals around the nucleus. From our basis in quantum numbers, we got to understand that electrons are not just directly located on the shells, but they are located in what we call subshells or orbitals. Is that okay? So before we can arrange electrons in an atom, the electrons can be arranged in these orbitals. Is that okay? But before we can arrange any electron into any orbital of an atom, there are certain principles that is going to guide us on how to arrange electrons in orbitals of an atom. Is that okay? So in this lesson, we are going to consider three of these principles. We have one, the Aufbaus principle. We have two, the Pauli's exclusion principle. And then we have three, the Ham's rule of maximum multiplicity. So we have one, the Aufbaus principle. We have two, the Pauli exclusion principle. We have three, the Ham's rule of maximum multiplicity. So these are the three principles that is going to guide us on our electron arrangement. The Aufbaus principle, the Pauli exclusion principle, and the Ham's rule of maximum multiplicity. Is that okay? So we'll go through each of them one after the other, and then we will be able to understand how electrons are arranged in orbitals of an atom. Now let's take the first one, the Aufbaus principle. What does this principle mean, or does it state? With the Aufbaus principle, it states that anytime we want to arrange electrons in the orbitals of an atom, we should start from orbitals of low energy levels. We should start with orbitals of low energy levels and fill them first, fully, before we fill orbitals of higher energy levels. Anytime we want to fill electrons in orbitals, we start from orbitals of low energy first, before we fill orbitals of high energy level. Is that okay? The Aufbaus principle is also known as the building up principle. When you're building a house, we don't start from the rooftop to the foundation. We start from the foundation to the rooftop. Is that okay? So with the building up principle, it simply means that if you want to arrange electrons in the orbitals of an atom, you start with the orbitals with the lowest energy level, or orbitals that are closest to the nucleus, before moving to those that are further away from the nucleus. Is that okay? Alright. So with the Aufbaus principle, electrons enter orbitals of lower energies, of lower energy level, fully first, before orbitals energy. So with the Aufbaus principle, electrons enter orbitals of lower energy level fully first before orbitals of higher energy levels. So the Aufbaus principle is very simple. Anytime we want to arrange electrons in orbitals of an atom, we start with orbitals with the lowest energy level before we move on to orbital with higher energy level. Is that okay? So from our ideology in quantum, we got to know that the first shell or the first energy level has one orbital, and that is the s orbital. In the second, we have the 2s and the 2p. In the third, we have the 3s, the 3p, and the 3d. In the fourth energy level, we have the 4s, the 4p, the 4d, and the 4f. In the fifth energy level, we have the 5s, the 5p, the 5d, the 5f. So these are the orbitals regarding the shell. So here is n is equal to 1, that is the first shell. Here is n is equal to 2. Here is when n is 3. Here is when n is 4. Here is when n is 5. Or simply, this is the K shell, this is the L shell, this is the M shell, this is the N shell, this is the O shell. Each of them corresponds to the orbitals present in each energy level. Is that okay? So with the Aufbaus principle, we are saying that before we can arrange electrons in these orbitals, we start with orbitals with the lowest energy level. Is that okay? Or orbitals that are closest to the nucleus before we move on to those of higher energy level. The lowest energy level orbital here is the 1s orbital. So always, if we want to arrange electrons in orbitals, we must fully fill the 1s orbital first before we can move on to the next one. The next one to fill here is the 2s orbital. So once we're done fully filling the 1s orbital, the next thing we can also fill is the 2s orbital. Is that okay? Once we are done filling the 2s, the next orbital we can fill is the 2p orbital. And once we're done filling the 2p, the next orbital to fill is the 3s orbital. Is that okay? Once we're done filling the 3s orbital, the next orbital to fill is the 3p orbital. Once we're done filling the 3p, the next orbital to fill is the 4s orbital. Once we're done filling the 4s, the next is the 3d orbital. And then once we're done filling the 3d, the next is the 4p. Once we're done filling the 4p, the next is the 5s orbital. Is that okay? So this is the electron arrangement. But I'm going to consider the first 30 elements, or let's say the first 20 elements. So with the first 20 elements, the first orbital to fill is the 1s. Once you're done filling the 1s, then move on to the 2s. Once you're done filling the 2s, you move on to the 2p. Once you're done filling the 2p, you move on to the 3s. Once you're done filling the 3s, you move on to the 3p. Once you're done filling the 3p, you move on to the 4s. Once you're done filling the 4s, then you move on to the 3d. So this is going to be how we are going to arrange electrons in this orbital. And the electrons must be arranged in this orbital based on this arrangement. Is that okay? This arrangement corresponds to the Aufbaus principle. This arrangement corresponds to the Aufbaus principle. With the Aufbaus principle, we can only fill electrons in an orbital from the lowest form to the highest form based on their energy levels. Is that okay? And this is the arrangement of the orbitals based on their energy level. This is the lowest, and once you're moving forward, it is increasing energy level. So I can write here, increasing energy level. Is that okay? So that is the Aufbaus principle. So you can also use this diagram to serve as a guide. You first fill the 1s, the 2s, the 2p, then come and fill the 3s, move on to the next, the 3p, come and fill the 4s. Once you then move on to the next, the 3d, come and fill the 4p, and and then the 5s orbital. Is that okay? Are we good? Yes. So that is the Aufbaus principle, or the building up principle. So based on that, we can write the electron configuration of every element based on their energy levels and the orbitals present there. Now let's take the first element, that is hydrogen. So hydrogen, the orbital present is the 1s, and hydrogen has only one electron, and that electron is indicated on the orbital. So this is the configuration of hydrogen, 1s1. That is the configuration of hydrogen. Now let's move on to the next element, that is atomic number 2, helium. So helium also has the 1s orbital present, and it has 2 electrons. Lithium is atomic number 3, lithium becomes 1s2. We are done filling the 1s2, move on to the next one, that is the 2s. And there is only one electron left, so it becomes 2s1. Is that okay? Now we move on to the next element. That is beryllium. So beryllium becomes 1s2 and then 2s2. Boron. Boron